Chapter 10, Right Time, Right Place. KPPC-FM, Pasadena Presbyterian Church, February 1970. The request line in the studio was ringing off the wall. I picked it up and barked, "Rap line."
Hey, Dave, your old buddy, Steven Siegel.
"Hey, Steve, you in Boston? You calling from WBCN?
No. Man, I'm in L.A.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm out here now.
So where you working?"
KMET, of course.
"Sorry, I didn't know. I'd quit listening," I lied. "What happened in Boston?"
Nothing, just burnout. Boston's okay, but LA's where it's at. You know that.
"Sure, I know that," I said. "Everybody hates Los Angeles, but they all want to be here."
Yeah, Charles Laquadera told me what's been going on with you. You've had some problems out here. How would you like to take over a radio station?
"What do you mean, Steve?"
You know what it's like, being in the right place at the right time, having God on your side. How would you like to take over KPPC again?
"Well, what did you have in mind?"
Me and you and Les Carter.
"I'd like to talk about it, Steve."
Good. I'll come by your place tonight. Where are you?
"I'm out in the valley, 6416 Babcock, North Hollywood, right off Victory Boulevard, right between Coldwater and Laurel Canyon."
I'll see you there. And hey, by the way, that's some mighty weak stones you're playing. Put some balls into it. Go back and find some of the early songs, some of the blues stuff.
Steve showed up at my house that night with a joint in one hand and a scotch in the other. He laid out the plan.
Here's the way we're going to do it. The first thing we're going to do is get me on part-time at KPPC. You get me a part-time job, just one shift, Saturday night, Sunday night, don't matter. And from there, it'll be just a matter of weeks before I get a full-time job.
The Seagull certainly had plenty of confidence. He never was short of that.
And somewhere along there, we'll get Les Carter hired. As soon as we do that, then Les is going to gravitate his way to program director. And from there on, we'll run the radio station.
It seemed simple the way Steve was talking. "Well, it sounds like you and Les got it all figured out," I said.
Well, I talked to Les about it, yeah. It's really my idea. Les would like to come back, but he's happy with what he's doing. He's been at KPPC twice already. He's had enough. He really don't care if he comes back or not, but he would, and we need him. He's the one guy who can front as program director. He's the guy who can do the job.
"Yeah, you're right about that. So why do you need me? It sounds like you and Les got it all covered."
'Cause you're already on the inside. You're on the air. You can get me in. Plus, you're the one guy who can do your job like you do.
"What's that?"
Being the straight man. Suck up to the business guys. Keep them at bay. Make them feel confident. Even if they think the rest of us are crazy, let them know you're not.
"Well, Al Harrion says I wasn't straight enough."
Oh yeah, you are, Dave. Al Harrion is too lame to know the difference. Straight is in your bones, man. You got the instinct for playing it straight.
Steve Siegel seemed to be offering me a deal. It was the best one I'd heard yet. This one could work.
And to the rhythm of guitars, we hope you'll lend an ear. And the high notes come from you and me, for we will sing so clear.
Los Angeles, late February, 1970.
What was the biggest battle ever on the Western Plains? What was the biggest battle ever on the Western Plains? When me and a bunch of cowboys rode into Jesse James.
One Saturday night at midnight, quietly, without any publicity or fanfare, the most radical disc jockey in America went on the air at the last FM rocker with no rules. It seemed like Steven Siegel had never left 106.7. His impact on the sound of KPPC was immediate and profound. He had the knack for finding the tracks that were just enough on the edge to keep us out front. When the Seagull played a song, it was legitimized, and the rest of the staff quickly added it to their own personal playlist. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles press gave a lot of space to the move of top-rated disc jockey Jimmy Rabbit, who had come up from San Diego to Pasadena. He was rocking the city from KRLA and was now going to KABC. Rock music had taken over yet another radio station, this time at the network level, in the pop music capital of the world. KRLA continued to present great concerts to the music-loving masses, bringing up the Jefferson Airplane into Anaheim Convention Center. The backup group was some of the airplane's own musicians, taking the stage under the name Hot Tuna. Glenn McKay's Headlights did the light show for both groups. Marilee Sachs had become a real groupie, hanging out with the airplane and living with Glenn. She brought him over to my show at the bottom of the church, where the KPPC listeners heard firsthand about life on the road with the Jefferson Airplane. Randy Newman showed up at the Troubadour singing Mama Told Me Not to Come. The Doors released Morrison Hotel. AM and FM rockers were all playing Led Zeppelin. Jimmy Page and Robert Plant's Whole Lotta Love became number one. A month later, Sly and the Family Stone owned that top spot with Everybody is a Star. Members of the Los Angeles County Medical Association predicted mass mortality rates due to pollution in specific areas of Southern California by the winter of '76. The Free Press ran articles on how to survive in the wilderness. Rumors of a pending sale of KPPC in Los Angeles and KMPX in San Francisco continued to circulate. I decided to take a trip to Louisiana before it all started to come down. After a long day on the road driving east on I-10, we stopped for supper in a small rundown joint in Davis Mountain Junction, West Texas. We had to wake Shell, who had fallen asleep with 2 inches of her security blanket stuffed in her mouth. As soon as she finished eating, she would stand by my side, never saying a word, thus bypassing a rule that kids were supposed to stay seated till everyone had finished. We began to realize how seedy the place really was and hurriedly ate and returned to the black Porsche. I topped off the gas tank, then went to pay the attendant. He took his time filling out the credit card, eyeing me the whole time. I tried not to return his cold stare, but it was difficult. He looked to be about 50 years old, with lines in his face as deep as the West Texas desert ravines. He walked on a wooden peg leg. On his shoulder was a black crow. "Nice-looking set of wheels," he said. "Built by Krauts, ain't it?" "That's right," I replied. "Nazi bullets took my leg," he said matter of fact. "Nice-looking wife and kids you got there." I glanced over my shoulder where Kate was beginning to give me nervous looks. John David and Shell had their faces pressed against the Porsche window, intrigued by the guy's weirdness. To them, he was another freak in a continuing sideshow. "What's a guy like you do?" he asked, finally handing me the credit card ticket. "I'm a disc jockey in Los Angeles," I said, with a bit of pride in my radio voice. "Is that right?" he said, unimpressed in his Texas drawl. "That's your excuse for wearing your hair halfway to your ass and looking like a sissy?" I guess so," was all I said. I smiled real friendly, and I slipped my credit card back in my jeans. I didn't think he wanted to hear that maybe I was anti-Nazi too. I returned to the black Porsche, fired the Kraut engine, and laid rubber on the on-ramp heading back onto I-10. About 20 minutes down the road, Kate discovered we had apparently left Shell's security Linus blanket in the restaurant booth. "Do we have to go back?" I asked. "Let's not talk about it," Kate said. Shell never asked for that blanket again. In Abbeville, Nellie was obviously embarrassed by our presence. She took Kate down to the beauty parlor, hoping to modify her hippie appearance before all the neighbors and the relatives came over. The beautician was able to change the look, but not the attitude. The few days with the family was sweet as always. The bayou in late winter promised another year. When we returned to Los Angeles, I began to shop for another vehicle to replace the German-built Dream Machine with 100,000-plus miles and needing a new engine. I really wanted a Land Rover capable of getting off the pavement and into the woods. The spare tire brackets on the Rover hood was, as I told everyone, the perfect spot to mount a machine gun should a heavy-duty defense system such as that become necessary. I finally settled on a Swedish-made Volvo, tough, built to last, perhaps fitting the image of a revolutionary DJ. We were what we appeared to be, young and rebellious. This revolution was serious business. If you were involved with the peace movement, they probably had a file on you. But the FBI was used to fighting dumb criminals. Now they were up against college grads. We were the brightest and the best. The government forces were way over their heads. We had grown up with rock and roll, saw it come out of the rural South to the cities of America, and ultimately conquer the world with the sound of an electric guitar. Vietnam was blowing away our youth and innocence. We were finding out what life in the mid-century was all about. And we were warming to our roles as outlaws, the good guys, wearing black, not white, like Lash LaRue in the Old West. Finally, Zabriskie Point was released. The critics thought it was weak and it never caught on at the box office. But the federales were right to be wary of Antonioni. The image on the big screen sent a clear-cut message. America was in chaos. The forces of anarchy were loose on the land. Everybody was angry. Blacks, rednecks, long hairs, parents, and peglegs. From every city came the cry, blow it up, burn it down.
What was the biggest battle ever on the Western Plains? What was the biggest battle ever on the Western Plains? When me and a bunch of cowboys rode into Jesse James.
KPPC-FM, Pasadena Presbyterian Church, early March, 1970. On the drive to Pasadena, I was listening to the Seagull. He liked to play the heavy blues, and he was crazy for Dr. John the Night Tripper, who had brought New Orleans-style rock and rhythm to national attention. Steve was sounding really good. He was definitely leading the station in the right direction. This guy certainly knew his music, and he was one of the great radio rappers of all times. He could really knock out a commercial, too.
The record store that brought you the Mushroom Tab Choir.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a tab of yellow sunshine LSD.
And Shirley Temple's greatest hits.
Pardon me, did I hear you say spinach?
Now brings you the world's hottest new recording artist caught in mid-climax.
Hello, I must be going.
Here's a record that's been following you around for months. And now it's got you where it wants you. At Funky Records, 4622 Van Nuys Boulevard, in front of University Stereo in Sherman Oaks. That's right, you heard right. It's Groucho for $3.29 at Funky. You know, Funky is good. Funky is awful good.
You're good. You're awful good.
Hey, hey!
Funky Records also has the latest imports and all the current releases like Dave Mason and Paul Simon, but they've got tons of Groucho for $3.29. Funky Records, little guys fighting the record giants from Sherman Oaks at 4622 Van Nuys Boulevard.
I parked my car in front of the Pasadena Presbyterian Church and took the walk down the flight of stairs to the basement. As soon as I entered the hallway outside the studio, the smell of grass was evident. I walked into the studio and asked Steve if he'd heard the news.
Yeah, we've been sold. It's perfect.
Do you know who they are?
It doesn't matter, David. They can't possibly be as smart as us.
Well, they sure are straight enough, I said. They're the National Science Network.
I know. They used to own BCN. That's the old National Concert Network, NCN. At one time, they owned BCN in Boston, WHCN in Hartford, and WNCN in New York City. These guys still own WNCN. And get this, they play classical music in the Big Apple.
Yeah, I said, and they also place pharmaceutical ads in medical journals for drug companies. How are they going to react to us?
Obviously, the only thing they're interested in is making money. And so are we. We're going to show them how it's done. So we're still on track. As soon as they name a new general manager, we'll get Les in here as program director, and the rest is going to be easy. It's our turn, Dave.
It's the right time, I said. We'll have to fight hard for free speech. It's going to be a tough fight. But we got to talk to the masses over the radio. We got to have that.
Just remember this. Anytime there's a coup in Latin America, the first thing they take is the radio stations. If you want to be part of the revolution, you need a voice, a loud one. Watching it all happen from a rock radio station at the bottom of a church is like front row seats at a Who concert.
The blues record ended. The Seagull opened the mic and did a 2-minute rap session. Then he hit his next record.
I've been in the right place, but it must have been a wrong time.
Pasadena, late March 1970. The National Science Network, the new owners of KPPC in Los Angeles and KMPX in San Francisco, had sent their man out to the West Coast to take over their property. His name was Stan Gurrell. He was in his 40s, bald, glasses, distinguished looking, impeccably dressed. Gurrell was very New York, extremely corporate. He seemed to take a hands-off attitude, yet he had not only promised, but had started bringing in new equipment. He was also looking for a new studio to house the station that we all believed would become the next leader in Los Angeles radio.
All your private property is target for your enemy.
Steve Siegel immediately went to work behind the scenes by introducing Stan Gurrell to Les and Susan Carter, who easily charmed the East Coast exec. But Gurrell was wary of putting too much power in the hands of this hip broadcaster. After leaving KPPC in the spring of 1968, Ralph Hull had gone on to become sales manager at another LA radio station. That made him general manager material. When Stan Gurrell named him the new head of KPPC, Steve Siegel was convinced it was a stroke of good luck that we had been waiting for. Steve and I welcomed Ralph Hull into the station and immediately began to explain to him the need for a high-powered program director that could pull a disc jockey staff together, tune up the sound, and make a run for the top. There was only one guy in this town who had the musical knowledge, the stroke with the record companies, the reputation, and the personality to make it all hang together. Ralph's job could get to be real easy. Make the right choice, and he would be a hero. We didn't have to lobby too hard. In less than a week, Les Carter was the new program director at KPPC-FM. Steve, Les, and I had stolen ourselves a radio station. Fate was playing in our hand, and we were holding all the aces. The pace began to quicken. Chester Coleman found a building at 99 South Chester in Pasadena. It would be our new location and Chester's only legacy. Ralph Hull fired him the next day. We'd finally get out of the underground basement and into the light of day. For the Pasadena Presbyterian Church Fathers, it was long overdue. Matt Rubin, the hip young engineer from San Francisco, went to work equipping the new studio with the latest state-of-the-art equipment. 3 fast-queuing turntables with Stanton cartridges were just the beginning. Everything the disc jockeys had ever wanted was just a request away. Les Carter invited Ron Enor Midag from KRPI, the powerhouse FM rocker down in San Diego, to have dinner at the Carter's house above Laurel Canyon. Enor knew the music. He was also a fanatic about equipment maintenance. He was the only FM rock jock around with a first-class FCC license. When the evening ended, Enor was the new music director and the 9 a.m. to noon disc jockey. Les wanted the late afternoon drive for himself. The only problem was Bill Slater had been in that slot for several months. Les offered Bill late night, but he refused and resigned. On his final shift, Bill Slater played a set of songs that glorified the environment, and trees in particular. Susan Carter's comments were that Bill Slater made it sound like his replacement, Les, had to be some guy who hated trees. Don Hall moved to late night. Zach Zenor took weekend relief and became our production man. Les Carter was shaping up a team that could go all the way. This was an all-star staff, and I had made the cut. I stayed in my favorite slot early afternoon. I was comfortable there. Every day I put the new Airplane album Volunteers of America on the turntable and let Gracie Slick sing out to the city. Up against the wall, motherfuckers.
Look what's happening up the streets, got a revolution. Hey, I'm dancing down the street, got a revolution. I need a reason on the people I meet, got a revolution. One generation got old, one generation got sold, this generation got loaded.
KPPC FM, 99 South Chester, Pasadena, April 22nd, 1970.
I'd rather feel the earth beneath my feet. Yes, I would. If I only could, I surely would.
I'd rather be a forest than a street. I'd rather feel the earth beneath my feet. The clear, sweet sound of Art Garfunkel and Paul Simon. George Mitchelberg did the arrangement of an 18th century Peruvian folk melody, instrumental track by Los Incas, English lyrics by Paul Simon. Also on this LP are a couple of songs that we're going to be hearing a lot about. One of them is Cecilia, You're Breaking My Heart, a song titled The Boxer, and a remake of the Everly Brothers' great song Bye Bye Love, and of course the title song Bridge Over Troubled Water. It's a killer. Hello, Angelinas. I'm Dave Pierce. Welcome to Earth Day.
Yes, I would. If I could, I surely would.
It's been a long time coming, but today we celebrate as we look to the future when we can get off the concrete and back into the woods. On the concert scene, Bill Graham presents Quicksilver Messenger Service and 10 years after, out at the Olympic Auditorium. You know where it's at, the interchange of Harbor and Santa Monica freeways. Get your tickets at all Wallach stores, mutual agencies, Free Press bookstores, and, of course, at the Olympic Auditorium. Coming up will be John Mayhall, Albert King, and Cold Blood. It's a shady production coming your way here in Los Angeles. The movie Woodstock is out. Look for the soundtrack. We'll be hearing some more of the new McCartney LP. Some people are saying it's underproduced. More music from Mott the Hoople coming along. And later on this evening, we'll have a report on what's happening up in Berkeley with the blazing barricades and that campaign against the ROTC. I don't know if you've seen the Free Press article. The cartoon by Neon Park shows a Statue of Liberty with a gas mask. Earth Day is going to take care of all that. All inside your radio, it's KPPC FM, stereo 106.7. The environmental movement now had power. The months of rapping on the radio was bringing results. We had a stroke nationwide. Ed Muskie of Maine sponsored the Clean Air Act of 1970. On the last day of the year, Richard Nixon signed the bill, not because he or the business community he represented believed in it, but Nixon wanted to keep Muskie from being the environmental candidate in the coming election. Lockwood Era said, "All those bastards will do nothing for the environment. They just want to dull us into thinking they would." With Bill Slater gone, Jack Ellis became more disgruntled with life in Los Angeles. The smog really bothered him. He and I often talked about how much better the air was in Louisiana or San Francisco. Jack just couldn't wait to get back to the Bay. Some of his friends from up north sent Jack a large plastic bag of high-grade cocaine, which he carried around in a leather pouch strapped to his belt. Jack celebrated his last week in Los Angeles by constantly giving away toots to everyone he met. As soon as Jack Ellis gave notice, Les Carter went looking for a new morning man. There were several top 40 disc jockeys who were well known in the city with great personality and ratings to prove their audience appeal. Some of them would have made that switch to the new progressive rock format at KPPC, but that wasn't what Les Carter was looking for. Jeff Gonzer had been at KYMS in Santa Ana for 8 months. The conservatism of Orange County was beginning to eat at him. These were the people who named their airport after John Wayne. But the revolution was spreading nationwide like wildfire, and even the reactionaries in Orange County had to be careful where they tuned their FM radio. They could accidentally lock into KYMS and have Jeff Gonza spewing that left-wing comic crap into the innocent ears of their children. When Ted Alvey arrived at KYMS, Jeff welcomed him in like a long-lost brother. Here at last was someone who had been living where Jeff longed to be, that hour's drive straight north into Hollywood. But it was also depressing for him. Would Jeff and now Ted be eternally banned to Orange County? Would Jeff ever get back to Hollywood and Laurel Canyon? "Don't worry," Ted consoled him. "There are people in Los Angeles who still remember us." "Well, I wish they'd call us sometimes," Jeff could only hope, and keep queuing up the rock albums on KYMS. One evening, Jeff exited the studio to visit a young female acquaintance in her apartment. After some wine and smoke, the girl began taking off her clothes. Jeff wasn't sure what that meant. Perhaps she wanted to get it on, perhaps not. Maybe she just wanted to walk around naked. Who knew? Even the Orange County Board of Supervisors couldn't control this kind of behavior. When the phone rang, the nude body answered and then looked at Jeff. "It's for you," she said, handing Jeff the phone and taking the joint from his fingers. "Hello, Jeff," the voice in the phone said. "This is Les Carter." "Les?" Jeff asked, surprised. "How did you find me here?" "Well, Jeff, when you're putting together the number one..." KPPC FM, 99 South Chester, Pasadena, May 1970.
Oh, to live on Sugar Mountain with the barkers and the colored balloons. You can't be 20 on Sugar Mountain, though you're thinking that you're leaving there too soon. You're leaving there too soon.
He hadn't yet reached his mid-20s. He was a small kid with blonde hair, slightly longer than a page boy cut. His real name was Joe Rogers, but to everyone in Boston he was Mississippi Harold Wilson, using the Prime Minister as part of his radio name. Mississippi had been a big contributor to the growth of WBCN, along with Charles Lacquadera, Steve Siegel, and Sam Copper. When the Seagull came back to California, he never forgot Mississippi. KPPC's new disc jockey lineup was beginning to catch the ear of the city. Jeff Gonzer's exciting, youthful sound was on the air from 6 to 9 a.m., followed by the folk rock mix that was Enor's trademark. My own noon to 4 p.m. shift, now 2 years old, made me a steady veteran in the fast-changing radio wars. My shift segued into Les Carter from 4 to 8 p.m., and Steve Siegel from 8 p.m. to midnight. Steve and Les were soon to be the two hottest radio personalities in Los Angeles. It didn't take Steve long to convince Les they were working too hard and would benefit from 3-hour shifts. Les liked that idea, but gave me the 3-hour shift noon to 3 p.m. instead. He then took 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. for himself and Susan and put Steve in the 6 to 10 p.m. nighttime power shift. Then he told Steve to make that call to Boston. If Steve hadn't pushed him real hard, Mississippi probably would never have left New England, not to come to the West Coast. But Steve kept up the recruitment, and eventually Mississippi was on the air late night, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., a very important shift in a town that cranked up the nightlife around 9. The first evening he went on the air at KPPC, he dropped Harold Wilson and renamed himself Mississippi Brian Wilson in deference to the leader of the California-grown Beach Boys. He was fascinated with Los Angeles, playing the intro to the old Dragnet TV show when Jack Webb's voice intoned, "This is the city, Los Angeles, California." From there he segued into a 50s Little Richard, and his show was off and running. I tuned him in again around midnight and was immediately impressed with his choice of music and his low-key, laid-back delivery. He was perfect. In his rap session, I began to hear his sound effects. Everything he said was orchestrated, punctuated, exclamated by various sounds. I thought I detected the tapping of pencils, the rustle of paper, and the striking the microphone, along with other varied noises I couldn't pinpoint. He was another whole piece of entertainment when he opened the mic. Other radio personalities would copy his style, and in the future, even the far-right conservative Rush Limbaugh would rip off elements of this technique. But Mississippi was the first disc jockey to do it this way. No one did it better. Mississippi Brian Wilson was a master of radio sound. It wasn't long before Mississippi hooked up with Deirdre O'Donoghue. The hip, hot redhead was a great contrast to his young schoolboy style. Most FM radio shows were the product of the disc jockey and his old lady, who pulled and filed records for him, thus developing their own musical knowledge of where to find a particular song, which shelf in the record library, which album, and on which side. Sometimes you had a brainstorm brought on by a particular note or lyric. With your mate's help, it was possible to get a song on the air with less than 15 seconds to go. The girls often suggested songs for airplay, and most knew the board well enough to handle a shift. Years later, Deirdre O'Donoghue became a radio star on her own, doing a 10 a.m. to noon show on KLSX called Breakfast with the Beatles. It was listened to by all the old, aging LA hippies.
Ain't it funny how you feel when you're finding out it's real? Too soon.
Neil Young wrote Sugar Mountain on his 19th birthday, just after leaving Buffalo Springfield. When Joni Mitchell heard Sugar Mountain, she wrote Circle Game.
KPPC FM, 99 South Chester, Pasadena, late May 1970.
But before that, a disclaimer. Why don't you take it away, Fats?
To say Susan Carter's voice was drop-dead sexy would be an understatement. She was a good singer, had the record company back her album. The framed photograph on the album cover was a nude girl reclining. The body wasn't Susan's, but everyone thought it was, which only added to the allure. With long brown hair and killer eyes, she could intrigue any guy. But in a sex-charged atmosphere, she could quickly become an ice queen. When an overzealous record promoter at the radio station asked her the come-on of the decade, "What's your sign?" Susan Carter replied, "Clitoris," leaving him open-mouthed and shut down. Les met Susan when she guested on his jazz radio show to promote her album. By the time we met them, they definitely shared a similar offbeat sense of humor. Knowing there was a popular San Francisco underground disc jockey